We have a 1-2-3 punch of Earth-directed solar storms. 2 big active regions now have X-flare potential. And more regions rotating in from the far side means activity isn't slowing down. Those stories and more are in the news this week. If you want to learn how weather from our star causes impacts at the Earth that shape the future of our world, join Professors Dr. Jenny Meehan, Michael Cook, and myself as we guide you through a space weather certificate program like no other. To enroll in the Space Weather and Environment Science program offered at Millersville University, go to millersville.edu/SWEN. It's weather for the 21st century. This forecast also sponsored in part by CW Ops. Space weather this week starts off with a bang. You can see region 4246, it was already in the middle of firing off a kind of a warm-up solar storm. This is a solar storm that was actually Earth-directed and is actually hitting us right now, but it's pretty wispy and so it's not causing much of a disturbance. But that's just a warm-up for what it starts doing over the next few days. Starting around the 12th, you start seeing it crossing through what we call a hot longitude, and it causes the region to really start growing and start firing off bigger and bigger flares. We've been getting R1 level radio blackouts, but then it fires off this. You can see a little bit of this wispy kind of stuff in here, these dimming regions. This was an Earth-directed solar storm. It's one of 3 that we are waiting to hit us. We had that one hit on the 12th, and then on the 13th it fires off another one. You'll see it right here. Boom, there's another solar storm launch and a big flare, and again another one with all the flickering. Boom, right there. It's kind of hard to see, but we'll show it to you in coronagraphs. So we have 3 Earth-directed solar storms that are kind of back to back to back, all within the last 24 to 36 hours. In fact, as we take a look in coronagraphs, you can see the first one. This isn't it right here. You'll see a small little kind of eruption right in front. It's a little bit faster. Whoosh, right there. Do you see this kind of loopy thing that's sitting in front? It's a lot easier to see from stereo's perspective, and we'll show that in a minute. But this is kind of a camouflaged solar storm launch. That was the first launch. Then as we move forward in time, you can take a look at this next one. It launches up at the top over here. You can kind of see it in here. This is a little bit of a partial halo. This means that this storm is going a bit to the west of Earth, but there's still a good Earth-directed part of it. And then as we go to the next storm that launched just a few hours later, this is the biggest one. You can see a real partial halo. Once again, somewhat to the west of Earth, but definitely Earth-directed. So this is a back-to-back-to-back solar storms, and we'll talk more about them in the modeling as we take a look at the model runs. Now, on top of that, why are we seeing so many solar storms being launched from region 4246? Well, as we shift to our potential field source surface model, we can see the magnetic field of the sun right now. Of course, it's not exactly right because this is what the sun would look like if it were completely relaxed, and it's not quite relaxed, but it gives us a good idea as to why this area is so unstable. As we take a look at this, you can see that gold coronal hole that gave us some fast solar wind last week. Well, you can also see some closed coronal field lines here. This is what we call a very tilted neutral line on the sun, and the magnetic field just kind of has to follow it. But when it bends like this, it makes it a little bit unstable in this area. Plus, we had that coronal hole that made it worse too. So this is part of the reason why you see region 4246, as it rotates through those hot longitudes and grows and becomes unstable, it starts firing off solar storms back to back to back. Now, we also have this cluster of regions, 4248 and 4250. They're beginning to rotate in through the hot longitudes too. Yet, when we look at the magnetic field here, it's not quite as unstable, but we are still next to a coronal hole right here, which is going to also send us some fast winds soon. So we might start seeing some solar storm launches from these as well, although I'm not sure we're going to see nearly as much as what we saw from this region. So we got to keep that in mind as time goes on. Now, switching to our current sun, you can see region 4246 and the cluster of regions here, 4248 and 4250, kind of crunched over, but they're not the only story, believe it or not. Take a look at this massive prominence just over the last day or so. Look at that beautiful thing lifting off like that. We also had a little bit of an eruption up here as well. And as if in response, watch 4246. Did you see that massive, and back it up? Look at this massive jet of plasma. Man, this thing is like a big plasma tower. It's just gorgeous. So it tells us 4246 is not done. In fact, as you can see, these regions, as As this one begins to rotate through those hot longitudes, do you see, you're starting to see big solar flares from it as well. So as we take a look at these regions in magnetic imaging, we take a look at them in HMI. Region 4246, you can see over the last 24 to 48 hours, it's really beginning to grow. In fact, you can see all this emerging flux right there. That tells us that it's an X-flare player, and it could give us some big solar flares here over the next couple days. And when we look at region 4248 and 4250, again, in HMI, look at all that emerging flux you're seeing right there. This looks like we're actually going to get a completely new sunspot cluster emerging between the two existing ones. We've seen that kind of behavior before, and that was last cycle that gave us some really big X-class flares with region 2673. So this may be a similar kind of situation. But either way, both of these regions, this set of regions, could give us X-class flares in the next 48 hours if they continue to grow just as they are. And now switching to our far-sighted sun, we can use stereo A imagery because stereo A is now looking at the sun from the far side off the west limb. In fact, here you can see here's Earth, here's the sun, and here's stereo A looking at the sun substantially from the side. So as we get ourselves calibrated, this is that old coronal hole that gave us some fast wind last week, and you can see region 4246 just firing away. In fact, stereo A has a front row seat for all of these eruptions, which makes it perfect location for us to look at it with coronagraphs, because now we can start peeling away some of the details. Here is that coronagraph image, and you can see there's the very first solar storm that was launched back on the 11th. This is the storm that's hitting us right now, and it's giving us a very mild disturbance. It's kind of like a warm-up for the big show that's going to happen here over the next couple days. So as we let this play out, here's the next set of solar storms. Now, this was not easy to see. Whoop, let me pause it there. This was not easy to see from Earth's vantage point because we had one solar storm that was kind of going up to the north and kind of to the far side. Remember, Earth is over here, and the solar storm, the second solar storm, was actually going towards Earth, so it got kind of camouflaged because this was a stronger looking storm. But from stereo's perspective, you definitely can tell that that is Earth directed and it's coming toward us. So then that's storm 2. That's the one that's going to hit early on the 15th. Here's the storm 3. That's going to hit us shortly thereafter. And then, believe it or not, we have the biggest one. You can see that whole halo right in here, or not, it's almost a halo in stereo's perspective. So that's what we should expect over the next couple days. We're going to be hit by 1, 2, 3 solar storms that should then be followed by a fast wind chaser. So aurora photographers, if you're at high latitudes and even mid latitudes, we could definitely be in for an extended show easily in through the weekend. And now, taking a look at our full sun map, we can no longer use solar orbiter because solar orbiter is staring at the same side of the sun as we are. In fact, as we take a look at our orbit circle here, you can see here's Earth, here's the sun, here's solar orbiter staring at the sun basically at the same perspective Earth is. And then, of course, here's stereo A staring up the sun kind of from the side. So we can get some partial coverage of the far-sighted sun with stereo A, but the rest of it is being done with the JSOC HMI helioseismology far-sighted viewer. So let's orient ourselves here. Red is solar SDO AIA imagery. That's from Earth's view. The green here, this is stereo. You can see stereo EUVI imagery. And then, of course, in gold is the JSOC HMI helioseismology viewer that gives us basically a full disk image. And so as I put this in motion, you're going to hopefully you see that old coronal hole right there. You can see region 4246 as well as the new regions pop in. You see them being numbered 4248, and then 4250 comes along. But let me flip over here. So you can see the east limb being delineated here in the west limb. So this is now the far side of the sun. And as you can see, we've got some regions here, but look at these old clusters. These are the regions, there's actually two sets of them, 42, 26, and 27, and then this other cluster, which is 42, 38, and 39. These sets of regions are going to be rotating back into Earth view here over the next probably 4 days or so, and they have been active on the sun's far side, so expect to see more activity rotate into Earth view even as region 4246 and 4248 are still growing and becoming big X-flare players. So amateur radio operators, I know it's getting to be tough on the day side of Earth right now with the radio bands getting so much noise and the radio blackouts coming faster and larger. And sadly, it looks like as we move into next week, we will continue to have a lot of this activity. So just kind of hunker down and bear with us over this next week and possibly longer until these regions calm down. And now, taking a closer look at our Earth-directed solar storms, we switch to our solar storm prediction model, ENLIL. Now, this is NOAA's version of the model. The top panel's density, the bottom panel's velocity. You're looking down at the sun from the North Pole with Earth being off to the right. And as I set this in motion, this is going to have multiple solar storms coming out at us. You can see the first one here, the second one there, the third one there. These are the 3 sets of solar storms that came off as that 1, 2, 3 punch that should be hitting us right about the 15th. In fact, as we take a look at our first hit, this one is going to arrive about midday on the 15th, according to NOAA. Then we move forward in time and we get the second one that's going to hit us about noon on the 16th. So they're about 24 hours spaced. And then the third one is going to hit us again about noon on the 17th. So it's 15, 16, 17, bam. And then you can even see the pinwheel of fast solar wind. This is a stream interaction. You can see the fast solar wind here and the velocity is being super red, meaning that it's really strong. In fact, it looks like we're going to be coming above 600 kilometers a second. So that's going to be a fast wind chaser after all of this. So expect storming to start on the 15th and move in through the 17th and possibly the 18th before things begin to calm down. And it's not even clear that it's going to be calming down on the 18th. If this fast solar wind is super fast, it could actually keep us storming for quite some time because Earth is going to be so preconditioned from these solar storms hitting us back to back to back. Now, as we switch to our NASA's version of the model, NASA doesn't put all of their solar storms all together at once. So I did a composite to try to show you what we expect. And in fact, I even caught that very first solar storm that's hitting us now because it did a pretty good job modeling even that weak one. So as we take a look at NASA's version, again, you're still looking down at the North Pole of the sun with Earth being off to the right. And if you kind of, as I step aside here, you're actually going to see that very first solar storm being launched. It was kind of launched to the northeast of Earth, but you'll watch it come out here like this, and I think I even have it annotated. This thing was supposed to be hitting us early on the 14th. It's actually hit us a lot later. It's hit us basically almost early on the 15th. So sadly, what this means is that we actually are not getting much of a disturbance from this region or from this particular storm at all. But it is kind of a nice warm up to get Earth kind of ready to storm for you aurora photographers. So we're calling this storm 1. But then as we move forward, you can see the storm 2, 3, and 4, right? This is the 1, 2, 3 punch right here. You can actually see them 1, 2, 3 kind of overlaid as I've done this here. So that's what we've got labeled here. You can see them both, storm 2, 3, and 4, just kind of hitting over the course of time. And that's going to get us through about late on the 16th, and then we've got that fast solar wind. As you can see, a little pocket right here, that's that fast solar wind, and that's going to start hitting us right around the 18th as well. So expect that we are going to be storming easily from the 15th, about midday, in through the 18th and possibly longer. So aurora photographers, if you're at high latitudes, definitely going to get a decent show over a long period of time. I know there's a lot of areas that are very cloudy, so hopefully this will give us a chance to find some clear skies in a few places. And those at mid-latitudes, well, the peak is going to probably be between the 16th and 17th. That's what I'm guessing. So definitely keep your batteries charged and just keep your eyes on the skies. And now stepping outside and taking a look at our current conditions with our global Geochron map, we sure have been having a lot of radio blackouts over the last 24 to 48 hours, and this is mainly due to region 4246. You can see a lot of these radio blackouts here have been giving us some degraded signals up to about 20 to 25 megahertz, sadly. And so we have been seeing a little bit, as you can see, looking at the radio bands right here, you can actually see on the day side, which is this part here, as well as over in here, you can see see how the radio propagation lines have really cut out in this region, and that's because we are getting a bit of intense degradation when it comes to the dayside radio bands. And this is likely going to continue, sadly, over the next week possibly, and it might even get a bit worse simply because we're having to deal with region 4248 and 4250 now also becoming a big flare players, and we might even get those R2 to R3 level radio blackouts over the next week. So you amateur radio operators, hang in there, because it's not your rig. Conditions are just bad right now. And now as we switch to our ROTI GPS and GNSS scintillation risk map, these are for frequencies that are higher than the VHF and HF frequencies that I showed with DRAP. Notice on the night side, we've been getting a heavy scintillation over the Asian Pacific, where we've been getting a lot of those earthquakes, which is an interesting thing for you scientists. You might consider this a study period, because we know that earthquakes can actually cause a lot of disturbances in the upper ionosphere. So it might be an interesting period to take a look at. But for those who are doing search and rescue in this area, just understand your GPS and your GNSS signals may be a little bit strange and glitchy. So just be aware of that and stay vigilant. And now as we switch to our ovation model, well, Aurora's been pretty dim here over the last few days, but that's likely going to change as these bigger storms start hitting. We've been growing a little bit in Aurora, and that's simply because we've been getting a little bit more of the disturbances from some of those wimpy solar storms that have been hitting Earth. In fact, that same one that's hitting now is probably causing a little bit more aurora than even this shows. So Aurora photographers, get ready. I know it's going to be hard to find clear skies, but we're going to have some aurora probably from the 15th on through the 18th or 19th. So it looks like good times are ahead. And now switching to our moon, we are now passing through the third quarter phase on our way to a new moon, with the new moon being on the 21st. So you night sky watchers, if you want to catch those dim objects in the sky like some aurora, well, now is your perfect chance. And we also have the comets, both A6 Lemon and R2 Swan. They will be visible in the dusk sky right after sunset, so be sure to take a look at that. And for you early birds, well, we also have the Southern Taurids and the Orionids that will be visible near dawn. So if you catch some aurora, maybe you'll catch some comets or some meteors, because both are out in force. Now, switching to our solar storm conditions and aurora possibilities over the coming week, we are anticipating the 1, 2, 3 punch from those Earth-directed solar storms. Starting on the 15th, we could get hit with minor storm conditions, but expect to pop up to at least major storm conditions, with up to about a 65% chance of a major or to severe solar storm at high latitudes. And then after that, we're going to be looking out for some fast solar wind, so we could get hit with some fast solar wind by the 18th into the 19th. So aurora photographers, if you're at high latitudes, this is an excellent week to be chasing aurora. And keep your fingers crossed, keep your batteries charged, and get ready. Now, aurora photographers at mid-latitudes, well, we're not going to start quite as strong, but we are still expecting a hit on the 15th. We could bump up to minor storm conditions by the 16th and the 17th, and then, of course, we're going to go into that wind watch by the 18th. So we do have up to about a 20% chance of major storm conditions. We shall see, but expect at least a G1 level conditions over the 16th and 17th, and then things should be settling down by the time we get through the weekend. So there's a good time to chase aurora if you have clear skies, and it's a great time because the moon is dim. And now switching to our solar flare and dayside radio blackout outlook over the coming week, we are sitting well into the triple digits for solar flux, and this is because we have some big flare players on the Earth-facing disk. We're definitely dealing with moderate noise on the dayside radio bands. In fact, NOAA's giving us about a 50 to 55% chance of R1 to R2 level radio blackouts. These are M-class flares, but we also have 10 to 15% chance of X-class flares right now, and this risk could easily rise as we go into the weekend, and this is because those regions are rotating through those hot longitudes and they are growing fast. There is a lot of X-flare potential, so amateur radio operators and emergency responders, expect the dayside radio bands are going to be a bit of a mess this week, both on the dayside and on the night side, because of the big solar flare potential and radio blackouts, as well as the solar storms. It's just gonna have to hunker down and bear with us. And now switching to our radiation storm and polar aviation outlook over the coming week, everything is in the green when it comes to radiation storms right now. We are sitting at the D1 normal range. This is at flight level 360 for you aviators. It's also the S0 quiet range for everyone else. We are getting a little bit of trapped radiation, not that much, not even enough for me to put it as enhanced, but we're kind of keeping an eye on it. NOAA's giving us about a 10% chance of an S1 to S2 level radiation storm over the next couple days. I expect that's going to rise to about 15%. We're going to see what happens with these X-flare players. We could see this rise really quickly here over the next few days, depending upon how these regions grow. So if you are an aviator or a flight crew or a high-risk passenger, please pay attention to those ICAO advisories because these conditions could change very rapidly. But right now, you're all in the green. So the space weather this week is getting very exciting. We have a 1, 2, 3 punch of solar storms on their way to Earth, and it's going to be followed by a fast wind chaser. So aurora photographers, if you're at high latitudes, expect aurora basically all week. Aurora photographers at mid-latitudes, expect around the 16th and 17th. That's going to be probably your biggest bet for aurora, but you could also get it easily starting the 15th and possibly in through the 18th or 19th before things calm down. Now, amateur radio operators and emergency responders, well, sadly, this is not the best week for you. We've got a lot of radio blackouts and noise on the dayside radio bands, and this is going to continue. In fact, it's going to get worse before it gets better. So just kind of hunker down and deal with it. And then on the night side, of course, the solar storms aren't going to make life any easier for you. So you're going to have to deal with disruptions pretty much all the way around. And now GPS users, well, the same kind of issues for you. We're not having great reception on the day side because of these radio blackouts, and of course on the night side, anywhere near aurora is not a good place for you. So stay vigilant near dawn and dusk, stay away from aurora, and when those solar storms hit, be sure to calibrate your magnetometers often if you are a drone pilot. I'm Tamitha, the Space Weather Woman. Thank you for watching.